You've probably heard of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, right? Classic spooky poem. But what if I told you it's less of a poem and more of a perfectly engineered machine? A piece of psychological architecture where every single word, every syllable is a load-bearing wall, all designed to build a prison of grief. Today, we're not just reading it, we're taking a look at the blueprints.
All right, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to start inside the narrator's head, which is the real setting of the story. Then we'll see how this raven shows up and basically acts as a mirror to his own madness. After that, we'll pop the hood and look at the technical gears Poe uses to crank up the dread. And finally, we'll see how this one poem pretty much created the blueprint for every modern ghost story you've ever seen.
And this right here? This is the key that unlocks the whole thing. The horror in The Raven isn't some creature that's chasing our guy around the room. No, it comes from a silent witness that just sits there and lets the narrator tear himself apart. It's a chillingly modern idea when you think about it. So let's get into it. The story doesn't really begin with a tapping at the window. It starts way before that. It begins inside the mind of a scholar, a man who's trying to find a surcease of sorrow by burying himself in books, already caught in a deep, cold winter of his own making. Now, this is where Poe's genius really shines through. He wasn't just writing, he was designing. He had this one single goal, to create an overwhelming feeling of melancholic loss. He called it his unity of effect, and every single choice he made, from the setting to the rhythm to the sound of the words, it all serves this one unified purpose. And you can see exactly how he does it here. He maps the physical world directly onto the narrator's soul. That bleak December outside, that's not just the weather, folks. That's a reflection of the winter inside his mind. The dying embers in the fireplace, that's his hope, his intellect, literally burning out. The room isn't just a room, it's a cage. So this is really the main idea for this first part. Our narrator is already trapped by his own grief, in a room that's just an echo of his own despair, long before any bird shows up. The stage for his self-destruction is completely set. Okay, so the stage is set. Our narrator is trapped. Now, Poe introduces a catalyst, the Raven, and this is what's going to push that internal tug-of-war between logic and grief right to the breaking point. This single image, man, it says it all. Pallas is the Greek goddess of wisdom and reason. So by having this dark, ominous bird literally land and sit on top of the symbol for logic, Poe is showing us, not telling us, that grief is about to completely take over. Reason is about to be subjugated. And you can literally watch his mind unravel in real time. And it happens in these clear stages. First, he's in denial. He's being rational, trying to explain the noise. Then he starts bargaining with this irrational bird, hoping for a different answer. But finally, he actually starts torturing himself, asking questions that he knows will only get him that one painful answer, nevermore. And here's the absolute kicker, right? The Raven doesn't do anything. It doesn't attack, it doesn't threaten, it just sits there and says one word. It's a mirror. The narrator is the one who projects all of his pain, all of his despair, onto that single word, and it's the reflection that shatters him. Okay, so we've seen the psychological trap. Now let's pop the hood and look at the how. How did Poe technically build this symphony of phonetic dread? This is where we get into the pure genius of his sound design. Check out this toolbox. This isn't just about making the poem sound pretty. The trochaic meter, with its stressed then unstressed beat, feels like a constant, weary descent. The heavy consonants create a consonantal burden, literally weighing down the lines. And that repeated O sound, Lenore, sorrow, nevermore, it's like he's ringing a funeral bell with the words themselves. He's essentially using sound as a weapon. These are the gears of the machine. Before your thinking brain even has time to process the meaning of the words, the sound of the poem is already making you feel tired and sad and trapped. It's like a subconscious assault. And this is how he achieves that ultimate unity of effect. The story, the sounds, the structure, it all works together to lock us, the readers, inside that dark room right there with him. We feel the claustrophobia because the poem itself has become a sensory prison. So, what does this all add up to? Well, in this final section, let's look at how Poe's masterpiece didn't just tell a spooky story. It fundamentally changed the DNA of horror as we know it. You know, the most important character in this entire poem is the one who's never actually there. Lenore. She's the absent center that the whole story spins around. She is the lost ideal, the reason for all the sorrow. And her permanent, irreversible absence is what makes the word nevermore so absolutely devastating. It's not just an answer, it's a final verdict on paradise itself. Before Poe, a lot of Gothic horror was about, haunted castles, ancient curses, stuff like that. Poe took all that big external horror and dragged it indoors, into what you could call the fractured interior. He showed generations of writers that the scariest places aren't out in some spooky forest, but inside the human mind. With The Raven, Poe basically handed the world the blueprint for the psychological thriller. This idea that the real monster is your own grief, your own memory, your own obsession, that is the horror of the mind. And you can see its legacy in countless books and movies today. And this is exactly why the poem still feels so timeless. The Raven isn't some literal demon. The ghost that's haunting the narrator isn't Lenore's spirit coming back from the grave. No, the ghost is the memory of her, a memory that has perched itself in his soul and just refuses to leave. And in the end, there's no happy ending. There's no escape. The narrator doesn't overcome his grief. Instead, he merges with it. He becomes a soul that is completely and totally integrated with its own sorrow, accepting that the shadow will never, ever be lifted. In the end, that word, nevermore, it stops being just the Raven's answer. It becomes the narrator's entire reality. It's the name of his prison cell, the definition of his existence. It's a linguistic cage built from a single word. And this brings us to the poem's final, chilling message. Some losses are so deep, they permanently change the landscape of our minds. Once that kind of darkness finds a home in your heart, no amount of logic, no lamplight of reason can ever truly banish it. And ultimately, The Raven sticks with us because it forces us to ask this question. It suggests that while loss might find us, the shadows it casts are ones we often have a hand in building ourselves. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? And it's the dark foundation of Poe's masterpiece.